What's up, y'all? Talon here. Today we're going to be going over the results from the 2024 North American International Championships held in New Orleans. It's a really nice city to visit. I was able to compete and earn a top 32 finish for myself, so hopefully I'll be able to provide some competitive insight into the teams and the players who were able to finish at the top of this tournament. So getting into it, we have our top 8 here, and we're going to highlight Patrick Connors first, a really incredible winner. I believe he'd only gotten top 64 at previous regionals, and this was his big breakout tournament, his first top cut, and he did not let it go to waste, putting up three really impressive sets. He was able to beat Shiliang Tang, Yan Sim, and then Aurelian Sula in finals in a really impressive fashion to get the first place. The finals in particular was a very impressive display of skill, and I really do want to congratulate Patrick once again. If you haven't watched the interview after the tournament win, definitely check that out. It's very heartwarming. A lot of people really falling in love with this new player to the scene, and once again, congrats to Patrick. Hope to see him do well at Worlds as well. Looking at the team itself, it does look like there's a lot of inspiration here from both Ryan Haig and John Miller's top 2 and top 8 teams at the Los Angeles Regional Championship. Rillaboom over Amoonguss is something that John Miller did, and then the Pelipper Urshifu Rapid Strike team has been around, but most recently piloted with the offensive Booster Energy Raging Bolt to the finals by Ryan Haig, and a Terra Water Calyrex is pretty interesting, so a lot of people went Terra Fire this tournament just to be able to avoid Will-O-Wisp from Incineroar. Patrick himself running Will-O-Wisp here, just seeing the value in that. But instead of just focusing on that, I think Patrick decided, look, I can get Will-O-Wisp, but if they're going to lead their Incineroar, they can just fall prey to my Rain mode with the Urshifu and the Pelipper, so that's something I'm willing to try and bait in, and that ended up being pretty effective for him. Raging Bolt is a Pokemon that I really wanted to use this tournament with the Booster Energy, but I ultimately settled on another Calyrex, but it just does insane damage with the Booster Energy Thunderbolts, just very consistent damage. We saw it in the top 8, chipping down the Wo-Chien, doing over 50%, so you didn't have to burn a Draco to do a huge burst of damage. So really cool set. Terra Fairy plays a bit more mind games against something like the Miraidon. This team, to comment on the Rillaboom over the Amoonguss, one of the troublesome matchups for Calyrex Ice, especially when you're going Terra Water, is the Miraidon teams, and then Rillaboom gives you a really solid matchup into that, where you can switch in the Rillaboom, override terrain, and then hit it pretty hard after it's Terra Electric with your Wood Hammer, or you turn out if you find yourself in a weird spot. So I do like the Rillaboom choice, and a lot of the choices on this team are very intentional and allowed Patrick to make the most of his ability to just play really offensively and read his opponents. Overall, this was the first win of 2024 for Calyrex Ice Rider, which is kind of crazy to say. It's gotten close a lot of times, but this is the first time it actually took it all the way. So congrats to Patrick for doing that. I'm definitely a big Calyrex Ice believer myself, so I was definitely overjoyed to see it finally take one home. Moving to the second finalist, we have Aurelian Sula. I believe Aurelian has gotten finals in several tournaments at this point, just coming shy every time, and I was going to be happy regardless whether Patrick or Aurelian won. Patrick ultimately came up on top, but Aurelian, an equally deserving finalist, played phenomenally in all of their sets on stream. Congratulations to Aurelian, but we're going to look at the team now. And it's a pretty interesting take on the Terapagos Choice Specs teams. Typically, we've seen it entirely used on Tailwind teams, but this one has none of that. The only speed control is Icy Wind Fluttermane and Thunderwave Grimmsnarl. This takes a lot bulkier of an approach to the team with Reflect, Light Screen Grimmsnarl, Iron Hands, what I believe to be a reasonably bulky Urshifu Rapid Strike with Safety Goggles, and Taunt to handle things like Amoonguss, which would otherwise try to Spore your Terapagos and basically stifle its damage output that way. Also Terra Grass Iron Hands, so really a lot of focus on handling Amoonguss, and usually that's paired next to Calyrex Ice. People tend to think that Terapagos just hard beats Calyrex Ice. I've not really found that in my experience playing on the other side with the Calyrex Ice. It's definitely a bit more even, but there's a lot of techs on this team that make it really, really hard. Chi-Yu pressures Terra Fire with its heat waves and overheats especially, and then you can just go into your Urshifu with Safety Goggles, ignore the Amoonguss redirection, and clean it up with Surging Strike. You can also Taunt to stop Trick Room. Glacial Lance isn't doing that much damage, and that's just not even talking about the massive damage output that Dark Pulse can do with the Terra Stellar boost, plus the choice specs. It's just really incredible. And then Foul Play Grimmsnarl to handle both of the horses before Terastallization, but the Calyrex Ice always taking a ton of damage from the stab foul plays from Grimmsnarl. I think it was an interesting decision to mostly opt out of the Tailwind Mirror option that Choice Specs Terapagos had largely been doing well with, and just opt entirely for the bulky aspect of it. Just acknowledging, hey, I'm going to be moving second with my Terapagos, but I'm going to be doing so much damage and have so much bulk on it that it's not going to matter. In top 4, we have the 2022 World Champion Eduardo Cunha with the Calyrex Shadow team, the highest finishing Calyrex Shadow in the tournament actually. And it has a Smeargle instead of the Amoonguss or the Clefairy we're used to seeing, so I do want to go into that because a lot of the European top players were really hard on the Smeargle slow kind of bouncy Calyrex Shadow teams. We saw a lot of Tailwind, we saw a lot of Clefairy Calyrex Shadow Rider do well in the past couple weeks, but Smeargle isn't something we were so familiar with, and we definitely weren't familiar with the Calm Mind Raging Bolt. This team looks a lot like the Regulation F teams, or yeah, I believe it was Regulation F, where the Urshifu, Rillaboom, Incineroar, Amoonguss Raging Bolt, I believe was the combo, where you would have the Calm Mind Raging Bolt, and it was just an overall very solid balanced team. And then we're kind of going back to that, except now we have two very, very volatile Pokemon in Smeargle and Calyrex Shadow Rider. Smeargle with Moody Boost, someone was telling me, because you don't get the evasion and the accuracy drops or boost from Moody anymore, you're actually a lot more likely to pull a speed drop or a speed boost, which can really swing battles if you're not against, say, a Miraidon. You'll just be able to go for very fast spores on your Smeargle, which can be very devastating. Give your Calyrex or your Raging Bolt turns to set up and then sweep the team from there. I want to point out that Calyrex Shadow here is not an offensive boosting item or Covert Cloak like a lot of other ones are. It's Citrus Berries, so going for one big burst of healing as well as the passive healing on the Rillaboom's Grassy Surge instead of the leftovers or the Draining Kiss that other Calyrex Shadows have. This one is Psyshock, which is kind of cool. Definitely hits things like Iron Hands, which are rising in usage a lot, as well as just one hit KOing Amoonguss at +2, which the Astral Barrage Calyrex without a spell tag was unable to do, and kind of put you into some weird situations. So I think that's very cool. Beyond that, it's just a very fundamentals based, pivot heavy team where you're able to just U-turn, parting shot with your Urshifu, Rillaboom, and Incineroar to get in your Smeargle to go for a choice turn with Spore, bring in a Raging Bolt to set up the Calm Minds, or bring in the Calyrex later in the game to clean up with Nasty Plot Astral Barrage. So a team with a very high skill ceiling that's definitely suited to a player like Eduardo's caliber. Looking at the top four, we have a Miraidon team that I believe Lucas Ceribelli got to second place at the Bologna special event the previous week, so definitely a proven team, but Jansen was able to pilot it all the way to the top four. It's a very offensive team, and we did see on the stream matches when the Miraidon player is making the reads right, getting the turns correctly, they can definitely just overwhelm their opponent. But when Patrick was getting the reads right, it's very volatile. He was really making it look easy on the other end. So a very offensive read heavy team there. Looking into the details of it, we see that it is the Miraidon Choice Scarf Terra Ground Chi-Yu strategy that can discharge next to itself and do incredible damage with Heat Wave and Discharge. Going around redirection, which can otherwise be annoying for Miraidon. A very cool combination. Iron Hands, which it seems like a lot of people were favoring the Iron Hands over the Incineroar that Rajan Ball was able to win the regional championship with originally with Miraidon. Iron Hands' Quark Drive and the just general bulk does synergize incredibly well with the Miraidon, as well as being able to go for Quark Drive boosted Drain Punches and Electric Terrain Quark Drive boosted Wall Charges for crazy damage in Trick Room. We have a Farigiraf with Psychic Noise, which is a really cool tech against the rise in Iron Hands usage, as well as being able to stop Regenerator healing from Amoonguss on the turn you hit it, which is pretty cool, as well as the Electric Seed Foul Play being especially effective against Calyrex Ice in Trick Room. Whimsicott deviating a little bit away from the Focus Sash set, which was very popular. We have Light Screen over Protect on this because we don't need Protect anymore. We can kind of just go for the Tailwind in front and Fake Out regardless, not needing the Terra. Or Protect in front of that is very appreciated. Light Screen makes your Miraidon and your Iron Hands insanely bulky, and then Farigiraf has some cover for its weaker special defense, as well as the Electric Seed to boost up its defensive stats, so you're able to pivot into Trick Room later in the battle if you have the Iron Hands and Farigiraf on the field without a lot of fear. And then you have Encore, which is generally annoying. You can't really protect your Restricted in front of this team because then Whimsicott can come in on a Volt Switch or something like that and Encore you, and then you're just like in a very difficult spot. So overall, really cool team developed by Luca and piloted to a top 4 by Jansen there. At the top of top 8, we have Shilang Tang, who used a really crazy quadruple Dark Team with Kyogre to get 13-2, one of the highest records in the tournament, before losing a pretty unlucky set to Patrick Connors in the top 8. Definitely a heartbreaker to watch in action, but still incredibly close and worth watching yourself if you have not. Going into the team, we have the Iron Jugulis Assaultless Kyogre combination, as well as Incineroar that Shilang and Justin Tang, as well as Andrew Ding, were favoring a lot earlier on in Regulation G. But instead of the previous members, we now have an offensive Urshifu Rapid Strike, just going for Terra Ghost to be able to avoid fake outs and just pressure a lot. For an otherwise pretty defensive team, you have the Urshifu Rapid Strike as an offensive mix-up. And then we have Grimmsnarl with a Light Clay, Thunder Wave, Reflect, Light Screen, and Spirit Break. Pretty standard set other than the Terra Grass, just one way to avoid Amoonguss, which can otherwise be kind of annoying, but generally you do want to preserve your Terrestrialization for the Kyogre to avoid the spores from Amoonguss. And then the Wo-Chien is really the star of the team. A very crazy set with Ruination and Leech Seed, being able to basically serve as its main source of damage and longevity. Then Pollen Puff, really you're able to take crazy hits on your Kyogre when Wo-Chien is on the field, as well as with Reflect on the field. So if you look at this team, it has a lot of damage mitigation. We have Will-O-Wisp, Parting Shot, Tablets of Ruin, as well as Snarl on Iron Jugulus, along with just the screens. There's some good speed control in Tailwind and Thunder Wave. So really the goal of this team is to set up defensively for the Kyogre and the Urshifu, just be able to go for strong rain boosted attacks uncontested. Even though you might be moving second, you'll still be able to tank hits very easily and then heal back up with Pollen Puff on Wo-Chien, or if you lead seeded earlier in the battle and switched out the Wo-Chien slot into the Kyogre, you'll be healing from that. So it's a very, very difficult team to take out. I saw a couple battles with this team go to time, being piloted by Justin Tang against, I think, Terran Birdie. Games were getting really close to time in that set, and I'm sure Xilang and his and other pilots of the team were facing similar things. Just the sheer bulk and longevity of this team is really incredible. Like I said, the damage mitigation on this team is crazy. So you can get the Pollen Puff up several times in a battle and get back up to Water Spout range instead of having to go for Origin Pulse, which is obviously a lot more inconsistent and deals less damage. So overall, incredible team building effort to Xilang, Tang, Justin Tang, and I believe Andrew Ding was also on this team. So yeah, very, very cool effort from them. A lot of people were saying it more or less broke the metagame, and I would have loved to see what Xilang could have done a little deeper in the cut. Patrick, definitely a very deserving winner, but the set against Xilang was definitely a huge what could have been moment in that tournament for sure. Antonio Sanchez, Roxon, brought a Terapagos team. It's a Calm Mind set with pretty standard sets overall on these three Pokemon, the Rillaboom, Incineroar, Urshifu. But the standout here is the Screamtail with a basically disable Encore booster energy set, similar to what has been, the most common set on Screamtail for a long time. But a lot of people's answers to Screamtail with Calm Mind, I believe this one's leftovers, is to fake it out. But if you switch in or you turn it into your Screamtail on that turn, you're able to Encore the fake out slot, which effectively kind of like forces them to switch out. You can also disable something like a Choice Scarf Urshifu's close combat if you position that right. And then Amoonguss is Mental Herb, which is kind of like a cheeky choice. A lot of people's Amoonguss answers is just like a taunt Pokemon, but if that's really your only answer, then just delaying the taunt by one turn with Mental Herb can allow you to put something to sleep and give you an opportunity to set up on the Terapagos. I don't want to cover Justin's team in too much detail just because it is similar in composition to the, I believe it was Marco Fierro who originally innovated the Calyrex Ice, Amoonguss, Incineroar, and Urshifu single strike focus, but the Ditto and the Iron Hands are definitely all Justin. He got top 8 at a previous regional with this, the Los Angeles regional. He was the highest finishing Calyrex Ice there with this team, and he ran it back with more or less the same. I believe the Incineroar is now Terra Water, the Iron Hands is Terra Grass to handle Amoonguss a little bit better, as well as not be pinned against Rillaboom and Urshifu, which is a cool call. And then Ditto is just an excellent answer against Calyrex Shadow outside of basically speed control. If you can get it in on the right slot after Calyrex has taken some KOs or gotten a nasty plot up, you can basically reverse sweep with a Choice Scarf, boosted up Calyrex of your own. And that's also pretty solid into Zamazenta teams with the Terra Ghost. You can copy their boost, get another one with the Dauntless Shield ability on switch in, and then go Terra Ghost and basically body press it with a stronger body press, and then body press the partners as well as if they are threatening you in that aspect. Another interesting team that was able to make the top 8, Kyogre team with Overqwil. So very interesting hyper offensive team. We'll go into the details of that. Overqwil definitely catches the eye on this team pretty immediately. It is a Poison Dark type, which is actually really excellent coverage against the Calyrex Shadows. If you can force a Terastallization out, essentially you're able to make it Terra with your Crunch, and then also knock it out with Gunk Shot if it goes to Terra Fairy. It's a really cool, unique coverage there. Beyond that, you have a Acid Spray, which can basically, after Tailwind's up, you can outspeed all your opponents with the Overqwil. Definitely in Tailwind with Swift Swim on the Overqwil, but then the Acid Spray boosts up your Kyogre's Water Spouts to insane damage. And speaking of the Kyogre, it is a Terra Ghost one, which is interesting. You're effectively using your Terra as a covert cloak to avoid something like a Fake Out to stifle your basically Tailwind turns, and then you can also become immune to Extreme Speed, even though that's not that common. And then Hydro Pump is a pretty cool call here just because it lets you really ignore the Wide Guard Pokemon, which would otherwise wall a lot of your Pokemon. We see the Bleak Wind Storm, the attack move on the Tauren, the Sandsear Storm on the Landorus, so having something to ignore the Wide Guard and really kind of disincentivize you from even bringing it is pretty cool. And so some common game plans for this team could be to set up the Tailwind, get the Overqwil in next to the Kyogre, set Rain up. Even if they knock out the Kyogre, if Overqwil's still on the field doing Terra Poison, Life Orb, Gunk Shots, that's going to be kind of hard to deal with. You don't want to bring in basically Incineroar to intimidate the Overqwil because we have Landorus with a Earth Power for you, Terra Ground, Earth Power, or Terra Ground Sandseer Storm at 100% accuracy in the rain. So you can't really intimidate the Overqwil that easily on this team. And even if you do, you're going to be knocked out by its partners. And then if you don't bring the Incineroar, you're going to have a lot of trouble dealing with the Overqwil's just insane damage output with Gunk Shot and Crunch. And then Acid Spray is able to clean up anything for the Landorus and the Kyogre that you would otherwise not be knocking out. Zooming out to some of the other teams in the cut, I'll start with Z Castagliola. With a really cool team. I believe Rajan Ball also used a similar team, but ultimately missed out on the, basically in the day 2 going 6-3, Z able to go 12-3, a really impressive performance with a very interesting team, deviating a little bit from the original Rajan team. We have a Chinpow and a Talonflame, as well as a couple different sets overall. And a couple things stand out. We still have the numerous discharge partners. We have Terra Ground Farigiraf, Terra Ground Talonflame, that's pretty cool. You can also discharge next to Iron Hands. You're doing a lot of damage, but you can heal a lot of it back with Drain Punch. And it's not, it's not doing anywhere close to 50%, so you're okay doing that a lot of the time. You have a Chinpow, which is able to boost the Iron Hands with Quark Drive boost. This one has close combat instead of wild charge, so you're doing crazy damage. So many ways to boost up this Iron Hands' damage with the Quark Drive. You also have Helping Hand Farigiraf. I actually played Rajan, and he went for a Helping Hand close combat in terrain against my Iron Hands. I was at maybe like 80%, maybe close to like 85, 90, and he like knocked me out from there, and it was just like super difficult to deal with, so definitely a very threatening option this team offers. And then a Calm Mind Ursaluna Blood Moon means you're able to sweep in Trick Room a lot better if teams are trying to double protect in front of you. They can't do that so easily. It's a really cool combination, Calm Mind Blood Moon, because basically you can protect in front of the Blood Moon, waste it, but you're also risking a Calm Mind in that circumstance, so it's a really tricky mind game to play. It's usually going to be in the Blood Moon player's favor. And then we have a Chinpow, which is able to boost the damage output of the Iron Hands, as well as just being a Focus Sash Pokemon that is able to output consistent damage, trade really well. The Talonflame fits a lot of roles especially well, but the one I want to highlight is number 1, Speed Control that you can discharge next to. Very cool. Whimsicott was filling a similar role with the, but oftentimes you'd have to discharge down to your Focus Sash. With Terra Ground, you don't have to do that. But the Brave Bird Life Orb means you're able to knock out Rillaboom from full. A lot of people, if they see the Miraidon, they're going to lead the Rillaboom or switch it in when the Miraidon's in the field. So if you have Talonflame and Miraidon in the field, you can basically read that, knock out the Rillaboom on switch in, and also it serves as a knockout onto Amoonguss. So basically, you'll use your Gale Wings Brave Bird to knock out the Amoonguss as it tries to Rage Powder away your Electrodrift from something like a Calyrex. So really cool options. I think the Talonflame, really smart pick here when a lot of people would otherwise just think, I'd rather use a Whimsicott or Tornadus. Definitely a smart and very deliberate choice here. In 10th place, we have Jody Azzarelli, who's the same team as Justin. Not going to go into too much detail there. I believe it's the same Ulpa team sheet. Julio Tarlo using a Calm Mind Terapagos team with some familiar faces in support, and then a Tornadus to set up your Tailwind for a late game boosted up Terapagos sweep. So really consistent team. Definitely takes a lot of precise play to do well, but Julio definitely a proven Italian player that has been effective at that type of playstyle for a while, so not too surprised to see him doing well there. And in 12th place, we have Alex Underhill with a very crazy team. I was building with Alex a little bit for this event, and he showed me this team, and I was like, nah, dude, Electabuzz is fake. But over the course of like a week, he like got more and more on the buzz, and he was like, actually, you know what? I don't like Burns' team. I'm going with the Electabuzz, and he only finished what, like, ended up finishing 5 places beneath him and outplaced me definitely. So the buzz was definitely legit for him, so we'll go into the details of that. So looking at the team, it's very interesting. We have on the left side pretty much all the support Pokemon. Farigiraf also a support, but I guess has some damage output. But yeah, the Annihilate with the final Gambit is really there to just punch a hole in your opponent's team very early. They lead a Pokemon that's trying to target your Calyrex Ice or your Farigiraf to stop Trick Room from going up somehow. If it's not like an Amoonguss or something that will live a Final Gambit, you can just Final Gambit in that slot and get Trick Room up. It's very cool. You can also Coaching your Calyrex Ice and boost up its damage and bulk, which a lot of teams don't have a lot of answers to. Basically, they can lead something that can beat the Final Gambit, but if you go for Coaching, they're kind of in a difficult spot in that situation, so really difficult mix-up to deal with. Smeargle is probably one of the most interesting Pokemon on this team. Usually we'll see Smeargle run very fast with just a bit of bulk. This Smeargle is very, very bulky and slow, so that it can underspeed the Ursaluna Blood Moon and the Calyrex Ice. As we saw Adi use on stream against Aurelion, you can decorate before your Calyrex Ice and punch huge holes in your opponent's team and then start cascading boosts once you start taking KOs. It's really cool in that aspect. And then you have Follow Me's Fake Out Spore as just general support. If you can get Trick Room up and a slow Smeargle on the field, a lot of people aren't expecting that. You can get a cheeky Spore off early and then just start going for decorates. And it's just such a crazy strategy. You'll almost always lose a game 1 against a team like this before you figure out the speed tiers. And then Electabuzz is a really cool option, just because if you look at the main sweepers of the team, Calyrex Ice and Ursaluna Blood Moon, they're both outsped and don't have defensive Terra types against Spore, the grass Terra type, in Trick Room. So Electabuzz is really there to allow you to just switch in on pretty much anything in the metagame that's not a boosted ground type attack, take the hit, and then you have Vital Spirit Follow Me on the field, and Vital Spirit means you won't fall asleep, so Spore will be ineffective. You also have Feint to break Wide Guard, Taunt if you just have something that's trying to taunt your Trick Room or something, I guess. I'm not entirely sure what Taunt is for. And then Volt Switch is just good to pivot. You can lead the Electabuzz and pivot out, or just like use it as a general pivot in Trick Room to get your sweepers like the Calyrex Ice and Ursaluna Blood Moon in safely, and that's just a really cool set, and probably the highest finish ever for Electabuzz. I know Magmar had a couple of top finishes back in like 2013, but this is really the first time we've seen Electabuzz shine, and that's just pretty cool. Juan Salerno is using, I believe, the exact same team that Marco Fierro was doing really well with early on in the format. No changes for the most part. Probably some EV spread changes and maybe a few Terra types, but overall the same core 6. I'm not going to go into too many details. Mark Jackson, I believe that's Master Mark. He streams a lot on Twitch, so definitely check him out. Really excellent finish for him here at 12-3. 14th place with a very standard Calyrex Ice or Calyrex Shadow Rider team. We also have Eric Rios with a similar team, but instead of, it looks like the Rillaboom, we have a Smeargle, and as the electric type, we have an Iron Hands. Him and Alex Gomez were very high on this team. I don't remember if Eric or Alex finished 8-1 day 1, but definitely they both made day 2 and had pretty solid finishes overall. So looking at the details of that, we have a pretty pivot heavy team in the Urshifu Rapid Strike and the Incineroar, as well as a Smeargle and Amoonguss for redirection. But what stands out to me is actually the Smeargle has Transform instead of Fake Out. So essentially the focus of this team is going to be to try and pivot Fake Outs on the Incineroar and the Iron Hands to get a free Calm Mind up with your Calyrex. You can U-turn out and offer offensive pressure with the Urshifu if you don't want to set up. And then you really just try and get your Smeargle in while you're taking out KOs and basically redirecting attention with the Calyrex. You can go for a Transform, and if your opponent could handle 1 Calyrex, odds are they can't handle 2, so that's a very cool strategy from Eric and Alex, and I'm really glad to see they were able to pilot it to a high finish at this tour. Paul Chua able to get a top 16 with the Ryan Haig team. Really solid finish from him, glad to see him doing well. And then Michael Zhang was able to get the highest finish with Zamazenta, so pretty far fall off from it winning a regional just weeks ago with Michael their bestie. Michael was also in the tour, but had, I believe, food poisoning on day 2, so didn't have such a hot performance. But we see some familiar members. I think the Fluttermane and the Latios have been kind of present on various compositions, but the Tyranitar is very new. I believe it's a Focus Sash Stone Edge knockoff set with Rock Slide, so definitely a favorite of Michael. I'm not sure what the targeted matchups are for it. Could be Rain, just trying to get rid of the ability for Pelipper to go for really strong Weather Balls, but overall really cool team. The Latios is now Life Orb Terra Fire as opposed to Icy Wind Terra Steel, so offering a bit more damage output into something like a Calyrex Ice. So overall, a lot of cool teams. Definitely excited to see how Michael is going to continue to innovate this team for the World Championship. Wanma was able to get the highest finishing Koraidon team with this Koraidon, Chi-Yu, Ogerpon, Fluttermane, and then the interesting Pokemon here, I think, is the Gastrodon. So I think the Ogerpon-Gastrodon combination is something that makes a lot of sense to me, just because Koraidon has some really solid matchups into some restricteds, but it's really weak into specifically Calyrex Ice Rain. So with the Ogerpon, you're able to go for Power Whip into Urshifu, Ivy Cudgel into both Calyrex and Pelipper, and if they try to, well, a lot of the times you're going to try and Terra Fire your Koraidon against the Calyrex Ice teams, but that's super exploitable if they get Urshifu in later in the game or even Pelipper. So that's what the Gastrodon is there for. You don't have to follow me with your Ogerpon. You can just switch into your Gastrodon and heal up, or not heal up, but get a special attack boost, start actually threatening damage back, and really protect your Koraidon. You're restricted in that aspect. So it's a really well-built team. Glad to see Wanma doing really well with it, and I do expect to see a lot more of this doing well in Grassroots in the upcoming weeks. 2018 Worlds finalist Emilio Forbes also day 2 this tournament. He has a pretty interesting team. There was actually a couple Terapagos plus Choice Scarf Final Gambit Annihilate teams in this tournament. I wonder if that was a team that was made public at some point, because it wasn't really on my radar, but I played one of them in day 1, and Emilio clearly did pretty well, and they usually run, I believe, Substitute on the Terapagos, so yeah, basically that's a really cool tool to be able to ignore Amoonguss's Spore. A lot of people's answers are just Spore the Terapagos if it's Calm Mind and then like deal with it slowly. But if you have Substitute, it's kind of hard to delay dealing with the Terapagos, because you can't Spore, it's just going to start getting Calm Minds up. So really cool innovation there when Earth Power usually is going to get a lot of usage, and then Screamtail also rising up in usage. So really interesting innovations on the Calm Mind variants of this team. And of course, we have in 22nd place Wolfqwil. I wouldn't be a dutiful YouTuber if I was not farming Wolfqwil for content. So going into his team, so there's a lot of interesting picks on this team. I'll go through them one by one, but the first one that comes to mind is the Terra Water Calyrex Shadow Rider with Terra Blast. So typically a problem that Calyrex Shadow Rider faces is, even though you can Terra away from the weakness against Incineroar's knockoff, it can still just Parting Shot you and kind of just lower your damage output immediately. But something that the Terra Blast option gives you is you have Covert Cloak, you can't be fake outed, they can't read your Terra Ghost to a non-ghost type and just like hit you with a fake out. The Covert Cloak will block that. You have Terra Blast, which can do about 70 to 90 against an Incineroar if it is especially defensive. You can probably get pretty close to a knockout on just max HP, but you have Helping Hand on Incineroar, so you can actually guarantee that knockout on the first turn and basically get a boost that way while taking a KO instead of just like being a bit slow to get your nasty plot up. So that's a really cool option. And if you ever have Rain on the field, that is just going to wipe it out. And guess what? The most common terrestrialization type for Incineroar is actually the Ghost type. Wolf has it himself. So if you do just like protect turn one while they try and read you, going for that Terra Blast, it's really just like not a winning proposition for them, because you can Astral Barrage them next turn and take the damage on their partner as well. I think Helping Hand in itself is a really interesting call on Calyrex Shadow teams. We see a lot of Clefairy being on the team, partially for the Follow Me and the Friend Guard, but also for the Helping Hand support to boost the +2 Astral Barrages to effectively just like 50% more, and really difficult to deal with for teams that are just EV to live the +2 one. You can't live the Helping Hand one. So fitting it in on the Incineroar is a pretty interesting call. Could make you a little bit weaker to Amoonguss with no taunt or ability to go for a Will-O-Wisp into your own Pokemon, but Wolf obviously able to find ways around that. One interesting choice is also the Urshifu with the Stellar Terra, so you'll be able to go for 1 boost on your water moves and 1 boost on your close combat. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of that is. There's almost certainly some close combat KO that Wolf was looking for here, but maybe that could be into something like a Rillaboom or something. I'm not really sure about that, but definitely a deliberate call. And then Room Service Pelipper is really interesting. I think it was very, very bulky and pretty close to min speed. It was out underspeeding some Calyrex Ices, I believe, and I think the intention here might be to be underspeeding non-min speed Amoonguss, which you can't underspeed min speed Amoonguss, unfortunately. Pelipper doesn't get that slow, but if you're able to do that, you can go for a Hurricane before it moves in Trick Room, before it can Spore any of your Pokemon like your Farigiraf, and that could be kind of effective if you're able to execute that. Also, just underspeeding Calyrex Ice in Trick Room is a good countermeasure. If you don't feel like you can go for a Wide Guard that turn, you can just go for a Weather Ball, knock it out if it's gone for a Terrifier in front of your Calyrex Shadow's Astral Barrage. So a lot of interesting choices on this team. Congrats to Wolf on the day 2 finish there. So the last team I want to cover is actually the team by Abe Ayer. This team was doing really well on ladder. I think a variant of it got like pretty close to #1 on ladder with like an 88% GXE, which is really, really good. Like 85% is like generally really, really solid. And then if you go above that, people are like start asking questions on who this is. I don't know if it was Ink or Abe that were on the ult, or if it was like some combination of the two, just like, you know, collaborating, looking at the battles together and basically trying to figure out the team. But Abe was able to do better in the tournament, going 11-4. I believe Ink might have gone around 6-3, but definitely did not make it into day 2. But overall, really cool team. Let's go into the details of that. So it has a lot in common with the early Kyogre teams. The same Tailwind plus Kyogre Core, Choice Scarf Urshifu plus Focus Sash Chenpao, as well as Serena. But what's really interesting here is the safety goggles. So typically on Ditto, you'll want to run Choice Scarf, but that's already taken on the Urshifu. Sometimes you'll run Covert Cloak or a Focus Sash, but again, that's taken. So we go safety goggles here just because it's like one of the, you know, it's another solid item, and it also offers you the ability to change moves. Sometimes people's game plans against Ditto is actually just stall at the 5 PP on your transformed move. With Ditto, with Ditto not holding a Choice Scarf, you can kind of like play around that a little bit better and conserve PP a little bit better into Protect. So really cool option there. And you're also ignoring Amoonguss, which can otherwise be kind of annoying for these type of teams. We do have a lot of Amoonguss respect on the team with a Grass Terra on both the Kyogre on the Urshifu, Whimsicott immune to it, Serena immune to it, as well as Taunt being on the team. So it's a really awesome team and something I was expecting to do well at this tournament, and definitely was not disappointed with the 11-4 here. There's a lot more interesting teams here. Tommy Coolin's team was like, I believe, the highest finishing hyper offensive choice specs variant of Calyrex Shadow Rider with a Another Choice Scarf Annihilate with the final Gambit, people realizing a lot of the restricteds don't have that high of an HP stat, so if you just max HP your Annihilate, you can final Gambit and outspeed them and knock them out in one hit with just, trading a non-restricted for a restricted is generally pretty favored. We also saw myself get 29th. Huge shout out to me. I just ended up using Justin Burns' team. Was talking with him. He said it was still going to be a good call for the tournament, and I went all in myself on that. But looking at some of the more interesting teams, I actually played Sam Pletcher. He had a really cool Goldengo with Grassy Seed as an answer against Calyrex Ice Rider. He also had a Life Orb Sandy Shock, which I didn't see on our set, but I assume does crazy damage if it's special attack boosting on the Photosynthesis. It also had Terra Water, Terra Blast, which if Sun goes down, you're able to do crazy damage to fire types, which would otherwise try to do well against the fire type coverage of the Miraidon, so interesting team there. Alberto Lara back with his Corviknight with a pretty strong finish at 36th place. And then looking down, we have at 49th place, Peter Chen. He's done well with a lot of weird bird Pokemon. In Scarlet and Violet, I believe he had a big finish with Staraptor, Hawlucha, a day 2, and then now we have the Talonflame, which, in the context, outside of the context of Z having a 9th place with the Talonflame, we wouldn't really expect Talonflame to do well in a format like this, so pretty impressive finish. We also have the Sylveon. This is also a Choice Specs hyper offensive Calyrex Shadow, which can be really scary next to the Gothitelle, but it's even more scary next to a faint Talonflame with, I think, Quick Guard. So overall, a crazy hyper offensive team that Peter was able to pilot to day 2, and a solid record of 10-5 overall. I think that will do it for the coverage of the teams on this event. I want to do a retrospective of my run as well as just the general trends in the tournament in terms of restricteds a little bit later on after the tournament has cooled down a bit, and I've had some time to analyze for myself. But if you're interested in seeing that kind of thing and you enjoy these type of videos, please subscribe to the channel. And yeah, with all that being said, peace y'all.